I'm not going to comment on the specifics of the case, of which I'm not aware. Evelyn, and then Linda, I think you had a question, and then back to Oleg.
Yeah, Amnesty International had a item today on raids into villages in Mozambique by al-Shabaab, probably not related to Somalia. I just wondered if, and people, villagers killed quite frequently.
No,
I wonder if you had a report
yeah,
on
I mean,
that.
we've I've seen the Amnesty International report. It's something that's very much on our radar, and something that we're very much concerned about, this violence. Linda.
Thank you, Steph. Regarding the Syrian political process, you mentioned that the UN envoy is in Istanbul, or was in Istanbul to meet with Syrian opposition leaders, and that there would be other meetings in the region. I was just wondering if you can share with us where else the meetings will be taking place, and with whom.
You know, as soon as we get updates from him, we'll share them with you. But he regularly travels around the region. But I'll see if I can get a bit more detail. Oleg, and then we'll come back.
On Syria, with this announcement on the consultations by the special envoy, does this mean we're coming closer to resumption of negotiations?
Look, I think we've been at this for quite some time. It's a process, I think, that's frustratingly slow, not least for the people of Syria. We're taking it step by step. Yeah, go ahead.
On Ukraine, given this lack of fund, this was discussed a lot in the council meetings elsewhere. The UN has a practice of convening donor pledging conferences. Maybe this could be the case in the case of Ukraine.
Yes, I mean, that's a good valid point. Richard.
It's summer, but this question symbolically has some weight to it, though it doesn't compare to some of the other topics. And people say the UN is behind the times. I can't remember how long it's been, but when thousands walk into the UN lobby, the clock on the wall is an hour behind or completely off. And maybe we discussed this months ago. I can't remember, and maybe it's officially broken.
Clock?
On the wall.
In the visitors'
near
lobby?
the elevators. Yeah, no, in the secretariat lobby.
Okay. Well, let me see what the if I can move the clock even further back.
Time stands still here, but not that bad.
Yes, I know. At least hopefully the year's right. Evelyn, then Matthew.
On Ethiopia, Eritrea, the UN, is there a peacekeeping force envisioned? Any details? Because the UN has seen this
UN
movie
was
before.
present in Ethiopia, Eritrea for a long time. The mission closed.
I remember.
We were also involved in the Border Commission. As I said, we're willing to help the parties as much as possible. Matthew, then Linda.
Is there anything planned?
No,
of
as
how
I said,
you're helping?
we're looking forward to hearing more details.
Sure.
Go ahead, Matthew, go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to ask you this. It has to do with Cameroon. It's reported that, it's identified Samuel Eto'o, the football player, as a UN Goodwill Ambassador, and it said that he will be touring with government officials, the Anglophone areas, trying to encourage people to either go back to school or stop protesting. And so there's a lot of pushback against it, and I wanted to know, one, when's the last time Mr. Fall was in the area? Maybe you have it or could find
No, I mean,
it
there's
out.
nothing more than what was publicly known.
Is this number? Would Samuel Eto'o's trip, if it takes place, he's in Yaoundé, would it be as a UN Goodwill Ambassador? And if so, what would you say to
check what his status is and who he
what
actually
people are
works
saying
for.
is that he said nothing about this crisis the whole time.
No, I'm
Basically
not
a
debating it.
cover-up.
I just have to see what the
Okay,
details.
I'd appreciate an answer on it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Linda.
Thank you, Steph. I believe there was a meeting this evening between the Secretary General and various Arab and other ambassadors, and I was wondering if you could share some information.
No, there's no read. I was on the broad Middle East situation, but nothing to share.
What about the meeting with the Africa Group today? Is that about budget issues?
No,
is it about
I'll
personnel?
try to get some details. Thank you, Brendan. All yours.
Good afternoon. Tomorrow morning, the General Assembly will meet to elect 5 non-permanent members of the Security Council. 6 member states are running for the 5 available seats. Those 6 are Belgium, the Dominican Republic, Germany, Indonesia, the Maldives, and South Africa. Indonesia and the Maldives are contesting the Asia-Pacific group seat, while the other 4 candidates will run unopposed. And just to remind you that there will be a stakeout set up outside the General Assembly Hall on the 2nd floor in case any of the member states would like to speak to the press. Also related to Security Council, the Intergovernmental Negotiations on Security Council Reform, or IGN, are continuing today. Yesterday, member states discussed the relationship between the Council and the General Assembly, as well as the size of an enlarged Council and the Council's working methods. Today, the talks are focusing on how best to advance the IGN process and move forward. And finally, the President will be ringing the closing bell at the NASDAQ market site in Times Square tomorrow afternoon. While there, he will highlight his high-level event on financing the Sustainable Development Goals, which will be held this Monday here at headquarters. That event will aim to address the challenges and bottlenecks that block private investment towards SDG sectors. It will also examine the role of the UN in strengthening public-private partnerships. There's more information on this event on our website. And that's it from me. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Sure. This is just a kind of now that the new PGA has been elected, can you give some sense of what the steps are in terms of? I know in the past sometimes they've been assigned space in DC1 or DC2 to staff up. What are the steps, as you're aware of them, in terms of when they'll start announcing or moving? Obviously, they need to be in place by September. But are you aware of any deadlines or an attempt to set up a separate website for them and staffing, et cetera?
Well, at this point, Ms. Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garces is the president-elect, not the president yet. So President Lajczak is still the president of the General Assembly. So in that sense, no, there will be no UN website for Ms. Espinosa until she becomes president. Regarding office space, there will be some allocated in the Secretariat. I'm not sure at what date that'll start to be occupied, but I can keep you updated. I can let you know later about what the exact details are with that. Okay. Yeah. Evelyn.
Brendan, could you read the first item on your list again?
The member states that are running for Security Council?
No, the next one, the ringing of the on the SDGs.
Ringing of the bell.
Yeah, ringing of the bell. Where?
So that'll be in Times Square at the NASDAQ market
Oh, at
site.
Times Square.
Yeah.
NASDAQ,
So the president will ring the closing bell tomorrow. Any other questions? Great. Thank you very much.
Accused of loving process and bureaucracy and things, and there is a bit of that. But actually, when you get to these crucial moments, the question of how you are going to take a peace process forward, what is expected of someone in the room, how are you going to structure your session so that they can do the sort of formal on-the-record bit which sets out the government position? How are you then going to help them to make concessions, to take things forward? If they tell you something, is it in confidence or is it not in confidence? Are you empowered to share that, to try and get something out of the other side? So these questions of process are vital if you're going to achieve a positive substance. And I think that's another key part of diplomacy, is knowing which bit of a process you're in. Are you in a formal bit where you have to say stuff that the other side isn't going to like, and they're going to say stuff you don't like because that's what you have to do because TV cameras are on? But then how are you going to try and go and square the difference quietly? Right, my example before I stop. I thought I'd talk a bit about Burma or Myanmar, depending on what you want to call it. Because, of course, almost a year ago, in August last year, a process started which led to 750,000 people leaving Myanmar and entering Bangladesh, with some horrific stories of rape, of murder, of attack, and a lot of countries, including my own, have said this is ethnic cleansing, or if it's not ethnic cleansing, it looks very like ethnic cleansing. It's hard to describe it as anything other than ethnic cleansing, and there's been a lot of concern about that. So what do we do? So the simple thing to do would be simply to denounce it, issue lots of statements, and feel very good about ourselves. But that isn't going to help 750,000 people sitting in refugee camps in Bangladesh very much. And Myanmar is a very complex country. There have been some very, we have, as the UK, for most of my adult life and my career, I was spending that campaigning for a civilian government over a military regime, that country has been isolated and has been ready to be isolated, and it has been under huge sanctions. And I think this leads you to a very difficult diplomatic space, where the reality is that if we are to do anything which is to improve the life of those who have fled, then we have to do it with the consent of the government, and we have to do it by putting pressure on that government, but not so much pressure that they walk away or lose interest or accept isolation over being told what to do. We need the main regional power of China to be involved and on side, because if China splits from the rest of us, then that sends a message to the government, which is, a very difficult one for us. We have to also be very clear about what our minimum expectations are, and we have to do all of this in a context which is extremely political, extremely distressing when you look at the television pictures from the camps and you hear what's happened, where our publics and the human rights organisations and NGOs are quite rightly expecting quicker action. So the UK has, in the United Nations, been what we call the pen holder. So in the Security Council, we have led on this issue. We have drafted different texts. We have decided when to call meetings. We have kept the sort of the pressure that comes from the Security Council on the parties involved to try and make progress and move things forward. We led a visit to Myanmar, to Burma and Bangladesh last month, I think it was, and we have led the follow-up processes on that, which have been all about trying to exploit and use the space permitted by the government to expand it, to be clear about what's expected, to be clear about the fact that it needs to meet international standards, and to be constantly sending a united message as the Security Council and as therefore the globe's preeminent security body about what's expected. Now, I'm not going to tell you that this is going completely well, it's all finished, nothing to worry about. But I believe a year on, we are in a much better place and we have more commitment, and I hope it will be, and the next question, of course, is making sure it's implemented. But we have